Good evening, Calvary. Thanks for joining us. Tonight we're traveling back to a time where there was some incredible classic gospel music. We've got a stash of old school music that will just warm your heart. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Tonight we've got some real classics from an era where music really spoke to the heart. We're talking traditional gospel with that wholesome, heartfelt feel. Oh, and don't forget a sermon that's straight from the archives. I can't wait to see what tonight has in store. So grab your Bibles, your coffee, or a cup of tea, cozy up, and taste, and see that the Lord is good.
My life was stooped in sin, no friends without, no joy within. I knew nothing but misery and pain. And then I heard about a man named Jesus dying for my sin. He had the answer to take my sin away.
Christ paid a debt he did not owe. I owed a debt I could not pay. I needed something to wash my sins away. And now I'm singing this new song, Amazing Grace, 'cause Jesus paid the debt that I could never pay. Could not pay. I needed something to wash my sins away. And now I'm singing this new song, Amazing Grace, 'cause Jesus paid the debt that I could never pay. Christ paid a debt he did not owe. I owed a debt I could not pay. Jesus paid the debt that I could never pay. 'Cause Jesus paid the debt that I could never pay.
One hammer cast a shadow on the rough, stony ground. It was raised toward the heavens, and all at once it came crashing down. It drove a spike 12 inches long through reach tender hand and nailed to one wooden cross one guiltless man. One spear was cast in anger into one precious side. Two dice were thrown in mockery for his robe just before he died. Two eyes were cast up toward the sky. Forgive them, God, he prayed. And I know it must have rained in heaven on crucifixion day. I know it must have rained in heaven on crucifixion day. And the promised resurrection must have seemed at least a million years away. All the lights went out in heaven except the light of love that somehow stayed. In the broken heart of God the Father on crucifixion day, I know it must have rained in heaven on crucifixion day. And the promised resurrection must have seemed at least a million years away. All the lights went out in heaven except the light of love that somehow stayed. In the broken heart of God the Father on crucifixion day. Crucifixion day. Crucifixion day.
Whenever we're coming down to an end of a semester, we know it is a time of stress, and it's anything but relaxing. And sometimes we are not too much fun to be around. But we need to pray for God to give us grace. What do you do when you get into a storm? I'd like us to turn to Acts chapter 27. I want to title this message, or brief challenge, it will be, The South Winds Blew Softly. You know, life is pretty easy when you are cruising in a south breeze. But what do you do when a storm comes? The real test of your inner man, the inner makeup of what drives you, is tested when you come against a hardship and a storm. As I talked with Mrs. Hall on the phone, instead of a Thanksgiving when the meal would be shared and the blessing would be there and the dad just went out jogging, to only hear a collapse and to find a dead husband and a dead father. That's what the Hall family went through on Thanksgiving. And as I prayed with her over the phone, and as she began to weep, saying, Jay lived what he preached. He's a good man. Those boys had a good heritage. She was expressing gratitude in the midst of that storm. The Horns have gone through a storm and the loss of grandmother, and on the way to the airport had to go and pray with her and say kiss her for the last time, because they knew she probably would not be alive when they got back. When things are cruising and when everything is smooth, that's fine, but how do you react when the south wind no longer blows softly and you are struggling for your very life? 1968, I took a youth group on a winter retreat. I rented a camp by Mackinac Bridge. It's called Camp Wilderness. It was a state park. Rented the entire facility. Took this youth group up, and the south winds blew softly. We had a great bus trip. We loaded up, had a great breakfast. We went down to Nub's Knob. Those of you know that area, skiing area. We skied there, and then those who didn't ski, we made arrangements to go down to a big toboggan run, a city toboggan run down by Petoskey. And my brother Earl and I were at the top of Nub's Knob getting ready to come down, and we looked at this cloud that was coming, and I told Earl, I said, boy, that looks like a real Lulu blowing in. And it wasn't very long after that we began seeing the snow, and then there was a tremendous intensity of snow. And I said, I think we better have them announced for all Calvary youth group to get to their bus immediately, because we had to go back up north, up to near the bridge, drive these back roads to get back into the camp, and I didn't want to have any chance of us not making it back in with that bus. We got the announcement made. It took about a half hour to get everybody rounded up. We were underway, and by now we were plowing snow on the main highway. It had come so quickly, so fast and furiously, that the plows were pulled off the road at 7 o'clock that evening. The DNR up in Mackinac City said that the city people and the state pulled their plow. They said there's no way. Worst blizzard Mackinac City has had in 33 years. And they've never had one like that since. Then somebody said, where's Boy Scout? There was a guy, because he always lit the fires, I called him Boy Scout. Norm Zink said, where's Boy Scout? I said, don't ask where is Boy Scout. After all the announcements, well, lo and behold, Boy Scout was not on the bus. We had to go back to Nub's Knob, turn in this mess, and the only thing that would pass us were snowmobiles. Nothing else was running down this road. And old Boy Scout didn't hear the announcement, and we made the announcement again, and we saw him coming from the top. His bill of his cap, he had this, certain people wear certain kind of caps, and it speaks of their makeup, you know what I'm saying? And here he comes with that bill flapping. And my brother Earl shared some devotional thoughts with him. And we go back, there's a pickup truck following us. The pickup truck had all of our toboggans and skis in it because the bus was packed. And now we're starting to make our way. It's fluffy snow. We're bumper deep in the snow. And then we make our turn south. And we're now 20 miles. No matter what we did, it was 20 miles. And the drifts off Lake Michigan were even with the hood on the buses. I looked out the bus window when I drove. The hood of the bus came even with these snow drifts. And we would have a team of prayers and a team of shovelers. And then we'd have one group that would come and pray, another group that would come and shovel. Some of the guys, I found out later, didn't rotate. They stayed out. The blizzard was so intense, we took toboggans and shoveled with toboggans. And finally, the pickup truck had to stop. We wondered why it quit. We opened the hood to check it out, and the snow had billowed up and literally formed a perfect formation of the hood underneath the hood. It had billowed up, so we couldn't even see the engine. So we left hoping that when the plows came through, it didn't smash that truck because it was buried in snow. And I knew we were in for a life and death struggle. And I said, men, we've got to pray. I said, we have to have a group praying. We had a half a tank of gas left on the bus. We were looking at an all-night stay there. And we'd shovel we'd go up about 100 yards with these guys and with toboggans. We'd try to make 2 ruts, and I would floor it, and I would grab the steering wheel, and then you would be blinded literally. Then we kept going 100-yard segments like that. Finally, miraculously, we got back into the camp. Late at night, my wife and another girl had supper fixed for everybody, and I shut the bus off, and they're carrying a body by. I said, "What happened?" They said, "He's passed out in the back of the bus." 3 guys had passed out. Fortunately, my brother Earl had medical training from the Army. He recognized instantly when he checked the eyes had already dilated. And he said, "We are in trouble." 3 guys were out cold, had overexposure and whatever else. And I'll tell you, my mind was racing through a million different things. How do you call a parent and say, your son didn't make it? How do you, and while I'm trying to keep everything else in perspective, we were in the midst of a blizzard, and it so changed their focus, and it so changed our whole mind direction, that the last thing we were thinking about was recreation. A couple of guys wanted to be here. I said, "Let's put our skis on and we'll ski in the Mackinac City." I said, "You won't survive 15 minutes out there in that kind of a blizzard." And what a blessing that we were able to revive, because there was no way anybody could get in. And we saw God answer prayer in a miraculous way. It's not very often you get into a circumstance where it literally becomes a life and a death struggle. What do you do? How do you handle these things? Here's Paul wanting to go to Rome. Now he ends up going under government sponsorship. And the ship is getting ready to leave. And Paul, there's a place called Fairhavens, and the sailors wanted to winter there. They wanted to stay. And they started pulling out. And Paul said, "Sir," look in verse 10 of this chapter. In fact, let's read verse 9 for context. "Now when much time was spent, and when sailing was now dangerous, because the fast was now already past, Paul admonished them." Now the fast already past was in reference to the lateness of the season. Paul was concerned about sailing because of the time that the fast was. It was, in Paul's opinion, not a good time to sail. And he said unto them, "Sirs, I perceive that this voyage will be with hurt and much damage, not only of the lading in the ship, but also of our lives. Nevertheless, the centurion believed the master and the owner of the ship more than those things which were spoken by Paul, because the haven was not commodious to winter, and the more part advised to depart thence also, if by any means they might attain to Phoenix." This is where they wanted to get to winter. They wanted, where they were was like Dunbar, and they're saying, "Well, could at least we get to Green Bay for the winter?" And they advised to depart thence, if by any means they might attain unto Phoenix, and there to winter, which is an haven of Crete, and lieth toward the southwest and north. And when the south wind blew softly, supposing they had obtained their purpose, loosing thence, they sailed close by Crete. Paul said, "Men, don't go. It's past the fast. This is not good sailing time." The sailors said, "We don't want to hang around here. We want to get to Phoenix for winter, to get down there." And they were deceived because everything seemed to be comfortable. The south wind was softly blowing. Look in verse 14. "But not long after there arose against it a tempestuous wind called Euroclydon." Horrible storm. "And when the ship was caught and could not bear up into the wind, we let her drive." Horrible time to put a woman at the wheel. I couldn't figure that one out, but that's what the text says. "And running under a certain island, which is called Clauda, we had much work to come by the boat, which when they had taken up, they used helps undergirding the ship, and fearing lest they should fall into the quicksand, strake sail, and were so driven. So we, being exceedingly tossed with a tempest, the next day they lightened the ship, and the third day we cast out with our own hands the tackling of the ship. And when neither sun nor stars in many days appeared, and no small tempest lay on us, all hope that we should be saved was then taken away." No longer a south wind. Now they're in the midst of a horrible storm. 14 days. What are the 5 tendencies we have when we hit a rough spot? Number 1, we have a tendency to feel. There in verse 20 said, all hope was gone. That feeling that there's nothing left. We don't even see the stars. How can we navigate? We don't see the sun. And there is a tendency when you run up against the wall, you have a tendency to feel. Especially when it's not a one-day deal. It goes day after day after day. The pressures become very, very intense. God is forming His character in you. God is building up your heart and building up your life. You have to learn how to function above feeling. When you get right in the midst of a class load and the projects are due and your body is weary and seemingly all hope of survival is gone. Remember the heavy loads that I carried in college. We were involved on Friday night. We would go down and do street work. We would street preach on Saturdays. Friday night we would open the Servicemen Center in Columbia, South Carolina, to deal with servicemen from Fort Jackson. Then we would preach on the streets. But then we preached in jails, and then we would do one-on-one on the South Carolina campus. Come back up Saturday night. I was the Sunday school superintendent of the church. We would clean the church, and then we would have a youth activity. Sunday night, we had quartet practice. We sang in a quartet, 4 of us married guys. And we would end quartet practice sometimes at 1 o'clock, 1:30 in the morning, and feeling to go back. And every day of the world, there's a Greek test or a Greek quiz. Every day of the world. And how we prayed diligently for the rapture at times. Wrongly motivated, however. But there is a tendency to feel. Secondly, there's a tendency to fear. It's the unknown. Verse 29. Then fearing, lest we should have fallen upon rocks. They didn't know where they were. They should cast 4 anchors out of the stern and wished for the day. They said, let's drop all the anchors, let's drop them out, and let's let the boat put itself into the oncoming waves so we are not caught in the troughs. Put the anchors out the back, and at least we will be consistent so we're not caught in those troughs. Tremendous fear. Maybe you're sitting here right now, and you say, I have absolutely no concept of how I'm going to make it through this semester, nor do I have any concept of how I would ever make it back for another. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of understanding and of a sound mind. And I wish time would allow me to develop this, but I must simply give you these points and I must move on. But I guess the amount of your effectiveness right now is going to be in direct proportion to how you handle the fears that come your way. And you will either jump in lock, stock, and barrel, or you will just stay along the edge and play along the edge, but you really will not become an impactor. You will learn how to live with a certain self-imposed comfort zone, and you will not allow yourself to be pulled out of that comfort zone, not make a step of faith, which is going to take sometimes for you to leave the comfort of here, go to a field. I think of Barb Perrine. I remember when she left our church in Michigan. She left a tremendous comfort zone to go to a mission field as a single lady. Now she's many, many years later. She still looks like a teenager in reality when you see her, but she has been many years on the mission field. And now trying to come back and recruit. I can guarantee you she went through some tremendous fears. I'll guarantee you she had to overcome some feelings. The third tendency is to flee. Verse 30. And as the shipmen were about to flee out of the ship, they had feared, they felt, now they're going to flee. I mean, think this through. Whenever you get feeling and fearing, you don't think clearly. These men were going to jump into the sea. I mean, as one guy said, come on. What are you thinking? Where are you going? All I know is I'm getting out of here. Oh, and you are going there? Billows? How long will you last there? Oh, it doesn't matter. I feel peace. Every semester, almost, with maybe one exception, I felt peace about not coming back the next semester when I was in college. Honest. And I could have talked God into it, and God could have easily told me that I could have ignored those, hey, it's called finish the job. What are you made of? And I think, yeah, what if they lay out a semester, and then I think I'll do so-and-so, I think I'll do so-and-so. What was I doing? When the pressure just gets on, you say, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of headaches. I think I'll flee. Flee to, well, I'm going to jump into billows. And then what? Somebody else is going to be doing CPR on you if you make it to shore. Cowards always think with their feet or their life jackets. Where are you going? For safety? No. By the grace of God, you determine today, by the grace of God, I am going to not flee. And then verse 31, they faced it. Tendency to feel, to fear, to flee, or to face it. Just fasten your seatbelt and say, here we go. Remember, I was coming back from the West Coast one time on a flight of what they call the Red Eye Special. And I had 3 seats by myself, and I threw a seatbelt around me, and I was laying, and I made a bunk out of those 3 seats, lifted up the other arms, and I put my seatbelt on, and I woke up, and I looked out the plane. There was every direction, there was lightning, and that plane I heard there was motors. Then we were tossed every direction you could think, and it didn't stop. And I thought the only way we could have ever flown into a storm like that is the pilots must have put it on automatic pilot and looked for a Krispy Kreme, because they went south, and they kept flying south, and we were over the Rocky Mountains, and we ended up way down south somewhere, and my wife met me at the airport. She said, you don't look good. I said, man, I am sick. I didn't lighten the ship as they did in this text. But I'll tell you, I came very nigh unto it. And I thought, well, all I can do is just hang on. Because I said, let me out of this plane right now. Last week, when the stewardess opened the door early, did you hear that, where she got sucked out? And I think it was while they were taxiing. The plane had not yet been decompressionized or whatever. And she opened the door, and bingo. She was history as far as this earth was concerned. But there are times, sometimes, all you have to do, when they announce rough air, when Dr. Jaco and I were going into Ohio last week, a week before last, when they announced they had a tornado had been going through, and all I did, I cinched up a little bit more. I said, well, you ride these things out and learn at this age just to cinch up a little bit. And last of all, my last point is to finish it. I wish time would allow to get into this, to actually go through the ramifications of this. But there's a great word, and it's finished. Jesus cried it on the cross. It is finished. Paul wrote it in his last letter to Timothy. I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course. That is character. To finish. People who never seem to finish are always starting something else, but never ever end up finishing anything else. What was Paul's focus? His focus was on helping others. He was barking orders. He didn't rub it in and say, I told you. I mean, he may have had a little bit. He said, oh, here's what we do now. And everyone, including the man guarding Paul, was listening. They were in a union. Inward calm is a result of a clear heart. Invincible courage is the result of a conscious relationship with the one who is your anchor point. And you are going to have courage to finish. Or you may be hanging on to broken pieces, but there's a great meal ahead. So don't submit to the feeling and the fearing and the fleeing, but face what you're against and finish it. And soon you will be in a much better situation. Farmer was milking back when they had the hand milkers, and 2 frogs jumped in his milk pail. So he watched them see what would happen, and the one's glugged. He said, I'm done. Glug, glug. The other one kept kicking, and by morning, the farmer went and checked. He was floating on a chunk of butter. And sometimes you just keep kicking and keep on plowing and keep on going. Don't quit.